Good evening and welcome everybody to the BRICS Bond Virtual Forum, our first ever virtual forum here in the Dearborn Public Schools. I'm David Mustin, Communications Director for the Dearborn Public Schools. Thank you for joining us. We've got a lot of audiences here today. We have of course, our live audience that follows us on cable channel 19, but we are live on Facebook as well. And we're cross-platformed with What's Up Media. So they're also carrying this live virtual social media experiment that we're doing here tonight. And of course, I cannot do this alone. So joining me is my colleague, my partner in all of this, longtime Etzel Ford and O.L. Smith principal, now here at ASC, working in student services, a man who wears many hats, many talents, Mr. Hassan Jaffer. Hassan, thanks for joining me here this evening.
Thank you, David. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to cover.
Lots of information today, yes.
A lot of information to cover. So we're going to get right into it. We're not going to waste any time. So this is a 30-minute program. We're starting right here at 7 o'clock. We'll be on till exactly 7:30, and then we're going to wrap this up. The whole purpose of this virtual forum is to provide the public with information. The Board of Education has put a very, very important ballot proposal on the November 5th ballot, the BRICS Bond ballot proposal. And it is our obligation as a school district to share the information with the public, answer questions, and clarify any information that's out there, and make sure that our public is well aware. Now, we're doing this through many different ways. We're doing it through social media. We have numerous articles that appeared in the local press. We have information being mailed out to citizens. And we are doing this forum here this evening. Now, by law, we cannot advocate either way for a no vote or for a yes vote. Our role here tonight is to share information. And we're more than welcoming questions from the general public on our social media platform. Direct message us. If you're following us on Facebook, just direct message us and we'll be able to get to those questions a little bit later on in the program. We're going to get through our presentation and then we will answer some of those questions. If we don't get to all the questions tonight, don't worry. We'll either answer you back directly through Facebook or through email. And for those who are joining us in the audience, we do have a live audience here as well this evening. We'll be able to answer those questions. We'll have opportunities for those folks to answer those questions. And we'll be able to stick around a little bit after if we run late and answer those questions for people as well. So, absolutely. Anything to add there?
Well, this is an important topic. It's been shared with the community, but I'm so glad we're having this virtual forum so that we can reach out a greater percentage of our residents in Dearborn. When it comes to school, it's a known fact that good schools translate to good communities and vice versa. So this is a group effort. Our job, like David said, we want to share with you the complete package, complete information, and hopefully we'll do a good job in spreading the news about this important bond proposal.
Yep, absolutely. And answering questions is key. So, okay. Okay, we'll just pause just for a moment. Right. So if we are still, for those who may still be watching on Channel 19,
right?
Because we're live on Channel 19 as well, we can kind of just fill a little bit here till we get our Facebook feedback. This is the wonderful thing about technology, is that you never know what might happen.
So why was the bond named the BRICS?
Good question.
And you have a brick
That's
right in front of you.
We've got our brick right in front. We've got our visual
symbolic,
aid right there to help us out. So BRICS, buildings, renovation, infrastructure, capacity, and safety. So it is an acronym. So, hopefully it kind of drives home the point that this bond is about the bricks and mortar part of our schools. It's not about those intangible things. It's not about salaries. It's not about books or supplies or anything like that. It's about the real brick and mortar that holds our schools together, our buildings that make up our schools. So that's where the name came from. Good question.
Well, I wonder who came up with that.
Yeah, it was someone much brighter than myself. That's why we have a great staff here. It takes a good team to do this, and I'm very blessed to have a very good team.
Diplomatic as always, David. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think we can
Yes,
we can probably just kind of
let's-
talk along a little bit here, and then we can always jump back and what have you. But it's always good to start off to remind people how big of a district we have here in Dearborn. We are the third largest district in the state, almost 21,000 students this year, and 2,800 staff members. And with that comes a lot of advantages. We're able to offer our students a lot of different variety of programs, which is beneficial for all of them. But also with that comes a lot of added expense as well. We have 34 buildings across the district, and so it's a big district, offers a lot of things, and but also at the same time, with that comes a lot of responsibility. We like to talk too a little bit about the history of our district. It goes back a long way. District started even before the 1920s. It goes back all the way, to the 1800s, the first schools in Dearborn. But it really, that people think about schools like Fortson High School, built in 1928, first $1 million high school in the country. We had a picture just up there just a little bit ago showing the groundbreaking of Fortson, which was kind of unique. To find that old picture in the archives, that was kind of nice to do. But our district really, it goes back to in 1944 when the Dearborn Public Schools and the Fortson School District came together and formed what we pretty much have as our district now. In the mid-70s, we added the very important part of our district, that little section of Dearborn Heights, River Oaks, and our Barry campus. We very much appreciate that addition that really rounded us out as a district. And there's always been a commitment by our Board of Education as well to preserve the buildings, to make an investment in the buildings in our district. And also going through the archives, we found some of these old brochures and photos from the 1940s and 1950s, just showing that there's always been that commitment here in Dearborn to maintain our buildings, protect that investment of our taxpayers, because really that's who owns these buildings. It's not us, it's not the school board, it's the residents of Dearborn who own these buildings. And it's important to maintain them, keep them up. And we've gotten a lot of years out of these buildings, and they have a lot of life left in them. They just need a little
some TLC.
Some TLC.
Yes.
That's it. You said it. Absolutely. So this bond is about infrastructure. That's what we've been talking about here. So I'm gonna, turn it over to you a little bit, and Hassan, you can kind of walk us through this whole. We hear that word a lot, infrastructure. It's kind of a buzzword right now, and kind of just relate it to us here in Dearborn.
Well, you just mentioned this is, a community that believes in its school system, and if we look over the years about the massive amount of students who graduated through our school system. And these are loyal students. Most of them come back and want to live in Dearborn, and want to have their kids and play in the playgrounds and attend the same schools that they attended. So this long history translates into one thing, and one thing only, for us to provide the best educational services to our students and to our community. So in order to do that, we have to have sound structures. The theme that this bond addresses, which is the infrastructure, addressing the infrastructure, is a uniform theme throughout our nation. We speak about fixing the roads. This was a slogan during the latest governor's campaign. Fixing the bridges, crumbling bridges all over the place, not only in Michigan, but throughout our nation, unfortunately. Underground water pipes that burst during winter. If these things, are not maintained, not addressed, we will have some major problems. So this is not unique. And just like at our homes, when we have some leaky roofs or windows that need to be replaced, and some costly savings projects, the school system is not immune to these structural upgrades. We have to upgrade the structure of our buildings. You mentioned Fortson, the first $1 million high school in the nation. This was built because the residents of the city of Dearborn and Fortson passed the bond proposal, close to $1 million, to finance the building of that magnificent structure that still stands up to now, and I think it's been designated as a national monument,
Michigan historical landmark. Yeah, absolutely.
Landmark. And if you recall, in 2003, when we passed the bond in 2003, we put an addition a couple of years later or 3 years later to Fortson, and I remember the district did the research to find the same quarry in Italy to have the stones that match the initial. So that commitment is unique in our district. So when we talk about major ticket item upgrades like boilers, electrical systems, roofs, parking lots, average cost of a boiler for a high school, you're talking upwards of $600,000 or $700,000. But on the long run, we will benefit from the savings and the cost efficiency that these boilers will give. So it's a two-way street, magnificent structures, but they need TLC, like we mentioned, and that's the gist of this bond, why we put it, or the board decided to put it in front of the voters. But just taking a historical look at our buildings, the fact of the matter is almost over 2/3 of our buildings in Dearborn Public Schools, the 34 structural schools that we have, are over 60 years old. We have several buildings that are going to hit 100 years old in the next 4 or 5 years. So we are an aging school district, however, aging but yet full of pride, full of commitment to educating our students, and also we enjoy wonderful support from our residents and our parents. So just to give you a brief background, average age is 65 of the buildings in Dearborn Public Schools, and we only have about 10 of them that are, between 20, younger than 60. Let's put it this way, but and only 4 that are less than 20 years old. So, with older buildings come more responsibility, just like us when we get older. And I can't speak about myself, not about you, David. I need more upgrades and more maintenance and more medicine, high blood pressure medication, and so on and so forth. But it's all good because there's a solution to upgrade the buildings. And to give, a visual about how large our district is. These 34 buildings, if we combine the living space, the actual space that house kids in them, we are about 3.2 million square feet. This is huge. If we compare it to the Henry Ford Museum, we are 6 times larger than the Henry Ford Museum. And how large that museum is.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're not talking about also the parking lots or the land or the athletic fields, just the initial or the basic structural areas that house our kids. We are twice as large as the Fairlane Town Center and larger than the Ford Assembly Plant. So you are talking about massive amount of square footage that need TLC. And again, almost over 2/3 of our buildings are over 60 years old. So hence, we need to keep that thing upgraded and up to par and also ready to receive the instructional challenges with the new phase of the 21st century schools, the technology upgrades, water pipes that won't burst during the winter, and electrical grids that can maintain and address the needs of our technology upgrades.
Well, and I think that you really, that's what this is really all about. Those infrastructure needs, also creating those learning spaces that will meet the needs of our students now. Let's face it, the way we educate kids now is not the same as we did it 20 years ago, let alone 50 or 60 years ago. The space is still good. It just may need to be tweaked to meet those newer kind of learning models that are out there and teaching models that are out there. So, this whole proposal came about not just off of a whim or not just off of the board deciding that we're going to throw something on the ballot. This actually started a couple of years ago when Hassan and I were out talking to the community about some boundary changes at the high school level to balance out enrollment at the high schools. Absolutely. And during those discussions, the community said, well, maybe you should look at the buildings, the capacity of the buildings and the infrastructure. So the Board of Education put together a committee to actually look at those things, the infrastructure of our schools. That committee was made up of about 60 residents. They came from all walks of life. We invited members from the PTA and from service clubs. We had government officials. We had people from the colleges and business owners. The administration was part of it, not the superintendent. He stepped away on purpose because he didn't want anyone to feel influenced by the board or the superintendent during this infrastructure task force, during their work. The administration was there as a resource for these citizens, and they spent about 3-4 months. They heard from construction experts. They heard from architects. They toured all of our, not all of our schools, they toured a variety of schools. They broke up into groups and went on different tours of the schools so that they could really study and see what were the needs of our district. They also looked at enrollment trends as well. And this infrastructure task force, they are the ones who came up with the founding principles that this BRICS bond is all about. In October of last year, they presented to the Board of Education, and they even, and they said in their presentation that the board is going to have to go out to the public, put something on the ballot, because the dollars, that was the only way that we would be able to generate enough dollars to address these needs. So the ballot proposal that people will see in November, on November 5th, it's the only thing on the ballot. It does not increase the current millage rate. Right now, we're paying 4.82 mils, and we're going to get into that technical part of that a little bit more. We're going to bring up an expert on that and talk a little bit more about that millage rate and how that impacts the residents. But that is the 4.82 mill rate is not an increase. And the total amount of funds that this bond will generate is about $240 million. And it will be in 2 series. Now, that's a lot of money. And when you have that large amount of money and you have a variety of projects going on at every single school, it's important that, that money is not going to be able to be spent all at once. So that's why it's done in phases like this, so that we can best utilize those dollars. Projected about $4 million average at every elementary school, about $8 million at the middle school level, and about $15 million at the high school level. And looking at the specifics of it, you'll see that infrastructure, about $194 million of this bond will go for infrastructure. And that is directly in line with the 4 main pillars that the infrastructure task force brought forth. They said that you've got to concentrate your dollars on infrastructure in this district because that's where the biggest need is. Those boilers, roofs, windows, water pipes, electrical systems. These are the things that need to be addressed first. Capacity is next at $21 million. And then safety and security, huge component of this.
Absolutely.
We're hearing from a lot of parents who are very happy to hear about safety and security, cameras at all the schools, additional card readers at the schools, secured vestibules at the schools, to making it harder, not harder, making access to the building more secure and controlled. So that's what this bond that is really all about. And of course, with any bond proposal comes the talk about what is this going to impact me as a resident? How's this going to impact my pocketbook? And so we, of course, brought the expert in here. Joining us on set, Tom Wall, our Executive Director of Business Services and Operations. Tom, thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this whole bond proposal, first off, I think it's important for people to kind of get a feel for and understand what are these bond dollars? Are we going to vote for this? And then, Tom Wall's going to get a big deck put on the back of his house? Or, what's the difference here between these bond dollars and general fund dollars? Why can't we use general fund dollars to do this work? So maybe you can walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, the state actually, by state law, has different ways of how to account for money. And one of the ones we have is the general fund. That's our main fund where we get $8,722 per student to do for operational purposes. Now, most districts are anywhere between 80 to 85% of spending that foundational allowance, the operation side, on benefits and compensation. The other 15% is used for utilities, for book supplies, for all those other things outside of that compensation model. So we roughly put aside 1% for right now for our capital projects. And that'll raise roughly about $2.5 million. But that is obviously not enough to address what we're talking about for the infrastructure, because the school funding model doesn't support dealing with your infrastructure issues just for operational purposes.
Gotcha.
That was a big discussion back in 1994 when they put Proposal A into place, but they never came up with a model how to deal with infrastructure. So every school district in Michigan deals with this. And as we talked at the Infrastructure Task Force Committee for many hours, was how to handle these kind of capital projects. So the other side is we have the debt fund. So state law requires us to keep the debt funds that we do for bond issues separate. We cannot commingle funds. So that money is accounted for in a separate fund all by itself. And that money is audited every year as part of our general audit. And when we actually use that debt funds, it is to pay down the borrowing that we do for the bond. Okay. So when the bonds are sold, it goes on the investment market and people buy these bonds for a series of bonds for each year. As we collect the money, each year we retire those bonds, kind of like your mortgage that you do. That every year you make a payment to the mortgage and the mortgage goes down. So that's very similar to what we do. So we can borrow all the money up front to obviously handle such a large project that we're outlining here.
Okay. So, we want to be transparent here about everything because, we place this on the ballot and we're saying if it's approved, then the millage rate stays the same, 4.82. But of course, the question is, what if it isn't approved? Then where does that millage rate go? So could you explain maybe a little bit about how that works, where that millage rate would go if this wasn't successful?
So when I first came onto the district about 4 years ago, we actually reduced the retirement rate because as bonds expire and taxable values go up or down depending on the market, we were able actually to lower that millage rate when I first came on board. Even in 2016, we actually looked at the financial market and refinanced some of those bonds to save taxpayers' interest. But obviously, that's more of just on the pay down. So as we look at the model, the screen that you have above, we looked at different ages of houses, depending on their market value.
Okay.
Because the market value could range for individuals. So we put a nice little spread there so you can see where your market value of your house is. Now, your taxable value is 50% of that market value. Now, that gets updated depending on when you sold a house, do a remodeling, and that starts where the taxable value starts. And over time, they might increase or decrease depending on the market value. Right. That is all determined by the city. The school district has nothing really to control on that assessments. We are just a product of whatever those assessments are is what we have to do with our debt millage to pay back those bonds. Gotcha. So the taxable value could go up. It's limited by the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is lower. So that's why your taxable value might not truly be 50%, but over time it started there, but it might have gone up or down since then. It's usually much lower than 50% if you had your house for a long period of time.
Gotcha.
So what we are doing here is trying to keep that 4.82 constant. When we had the infrastructure task force, they made a big point of it that we didn't want to raise taxes on individuals. Okay. The district had a lot of needs, but they felt that was very important for people to support the bond and kind of live within our means of keeping the millage the same.
Gotcha.
And so if the millage doesn't pass, the bonds in 2002 and 2013 will eventually expire and lower that millage rate. But the district's going to be in a situation of how to fund these capital improvements. Because I said we only put aside 1%, and that's not enough to address the infrastructure needs. So over time, we'll have to actually raise that 1% to maybe 2, 3%. And that has to come from our operational dollars, which means it's going to impact the classroom and our programs.
And so we want to be clear that these are new bonds, that this is not a renewal, this is not Correct. A continuation. These are brand new bonds. So as some bonds are being paid off and go away, these bonds are being added. So we would pay on these bonds for a 20-year period of time.
Correct.
Okay.
And the tax bill rate will remain the same if this bond passes.
If it passes, and if not, then you would see a slight decrease. You would see, and that's the other thing too. If it was not successful, I think that it's not like the next day, all of a sudden your mill rate would drop to zero.
No, it depends when the bonds that were already in place actually go down over time that we pay off for the bonds each year with our current millage rate.
So the 2013 bonds would be paid off in 2033?
Correct. They're 20-year bonds
Okay,
also.
so we would still continue to have a millage
Correct.
till 2033?
Correct.
Okay.
And we have these rates listed on our website. People can refer to, and they can ask us questions to know exactly where they stand on these.
Sure.
Every year when we hold our budget hearing, they're actually part of the bond hearing required by law.
Okay. So I just want to say that because we had a little bit of technical difficulties at the beginning and getting off with a clean start, our Facebook audience actually was not able to join us till we were into the presentation a little bit. We are going to run a little bit over 7:30, probably till about 7:40, just to make sure that we cover
Answer some
the
questions,
problems.
yeah.
We cover what was in here and answer any questions that may come up as well. So, Tom, thanks. We
Thank you.
appreciate you
Anytime.
jumping in and offering that expertise that only you can handle.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, I guess the big question now is, people are asking, so why do this now? Why do we have to jump into this now?
Well, the Board of Education and our superintendent, studied all aspects of presenting a bond to the community, and it's not an easy thing for them to say, we need to pass a bond or to carry on the same millage rate for the next 20 years. But as stated before, aging buildings, new set of challenges as far as the meeting the needs, the educational needs of our students. So if this thing works out, we can start the work as early as this spring, renovating and addressing the needs the BRICS Bond, have listed to our voters. And this new bonds, again, are not going to change the millage rate. It remain constant for the next 20 years. And also, we have very favorable interest rates. So when we go and borrow from the financial institutions, its interest rate, as you know, it's an all-time high, low, and we need to take advantage of it before they climb up. Construction costs, any one of us who did renovations on their homes or build a brand new home, they know that construction costs can spiral out of control, every 6 months or every year. So we don't know what the construction costs. The sooner we start, the more savings we can realize with this project. And also, it's the proactive rather than reactive approach. Now, we see an aging building like Fortson or Lori or Maples or Duval. We can't wait until we have a major mishap and then say, okay, let's address the boiler need after the boiler, God forbids, explodes. So from that perspective, it's so incumbent to address those needs immediately. Now, is this unique to Dearborn Public Schools as far as asking for a bond? Absolutely not. The Dearborn community, has always been supportive. We passed the 2003 bond and 2013 bond. But if we look at neighboring districts, from Ann Arbor, and by the way, Ann Arbor schools are putting out a $1 billion bond proposal for their community to upgrade their schools. Detroit Public Schools in 2009 passed a $500 million bond proposal, and this is when they were under the stewardship of the state. The state took over their schools, and still they passed the bond proposal because they believe good schools translate to good communities. Livonia, 3 years ago, 2012, passed a $195 million bond, and so on and so forth. So this is not unique. And why do we ask for bond? I think Tom elaborated on the fact that we have state funding challenge in the state of Michigan, and that encompasses all segments of society, not only the school system. But we were really hit very hard in 2010, 2008 through 2010, and we have not recovered. So the amount of per student allocation to our school district, we have not matched what we were getting back in 2008, 2010. So from that strictly needs basis, that's why the bond is put in front of you. Some important dates for our residents to remember. Absentee ballots are already out. You can go to the city clerk's office and you can vote this year, on the spot when you request an absentee ballot, and you don't have to give a reason because the absentee ballot rules have changed. You just say, I want to vote. They give you the absentee ballot. And you can register in the city clerks if you haven't registered yet. And remember, election day is on November 5th. This is the ballot that's going to appear. And again, like David mentioned at the beginning of this program, it's only one question ballot. So when you go on vote, there are no other issues.
Except for our friends in Dearborn Heights. They will have some city council on their
That's
ballot.
true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yep.
The River Oaks portion of Dearborn Heights is part of our Dearborn public school system, so they will see other things on the ballot. But for the residents of Dearborn, they will see this ballot proposal. It addresses the dollar amount, $240 million. That's how much money will be raised if this bond proposal is passed. And it lists the projects and how it will be used. And the millage rate, it will state the proposed bond program is a 0 mill rate increase, so it'll maintain what you have. And there will be, like any other bond oversight committee from the state. the school system, any school system, cannot propose a bond proposal without state oversight and without the state following this project from its inception until fruition. And we cannot deviate from the programs and the plans that we sent to the state. What we promised we're going to do, we have to deliver. And again, David, you mentioned it can be used for salaries or paying energy bills and what have you. So it's important. Now, we are fortunate to have with us our superintendent, Dr. Malaika, to tell us his side of the story, why this bond is being put in front of our voters in Dearborn.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jafer and Mr. Mustin and David Hassan for having me here. I appreciate the time, and I'm glad we had Tom on the set, and I'm glad we're doing this kind of format that we may look at in the future. So, I mean, for me, it's all about today, okay? Why I'm going to say today. I was at Lindbergh. I was all around the district today for a few different reasons. First, I was there touring the district with Mr. Wall and the Michigan Department of Treasury. They were actually out today inspecting what may go into the bond to make sure that the buildings actually needed some of those necessary repairs. Right. They will monitor.
There's oversight.
There's oversight. I actually went Instagram Live from the basement of you had the picture with the 1970 boiler at Lowry. Yeah. And you go into the Lowry basement, just as one example, with the principal, and you can see that the building is deteriorating. There's a need. Some of these buildings, you've mentioned the years and the time, and I think that's why over 2.5 years ago, I put this issue in the public realm by bringing it forward with you two gentlemen and the capacity committee. Mm-hmm. Then the capacity, we also knew that we had to look at infrastructure. So we've been talking about this in a public forum since May of 2017. Right. It's been in the public. I've pretty much had it on every board agenda. The board meets every second Monday of the month. It's been on almost lots of data and information. So that's one thing. The other thing is I was at Lindbergh School at 1:00. Very proud. We have a Blue Ribbon School, Lindbergh. Just so you know, the Blue Ribbon School is the highest possible honor you can receive from the U.S. Department of Education. Only 13 in Michigan are given out of over 3,500 schools in Michigan. We now have 3 years in a row, a National Blue Ribbon will be going to Washington. Yes.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
The students were so excited. And again, it's a reflection of Dearborn schools. Seeing the students and the excitement and the teachers and the staff, that's what it's all about. So why did I bring this to the public? It actually comes down to those, and David, we've got these new things. Here you go. The pop-out. I had
right
this
there.
at the smoke on the
there
grill.
It is.
This is the new portable sign, and the students were very excited. We are going to, maybe it was a sneak peek. The board was supposed to get it on the 14th. But they asked me when I went to Becker yesterday, where's the sign? Right here. Well, why am I saying that? Because it's not just the sign. It's those students that are there. It's the community. It's the school community. Right. Why do I say the students? We now have 95% graduation rates. We have 86% of our students entering a college program. We have students going to the Henry Ford College. This bond will support all of those things. We have students go to Harvard, Yale, Brown. We have students to go to University of Michigan, Michigan State, Wayne State, U of M, Dearborn, and of course, Henry Ford College. Our students are doing well. I do not want to let happen that the infrastructure is going to take down the strength of our district for our students and our school community. And we all know that strong schools mean strong community. So when I'm going to Lowry and Fordson and Woodworth and walking through the old buildings that need upgrade, desperately need upgrades, that's why we did this, because it also then turns into the achievement of those students, for example, Lindbergh and Becker and all of our schools in the district. And so that's why we're here, to ensure that the infrastructure does not get in the way of instruction, because as Mr. Wall said, what will happen is if we have some issues that occur with boilers and other things, we will have to put money into that, and we'll have to reduce staffing. We will have to reduce services for students. There'll be no choice. Just today, we have 3 elevators that are not working in the district, operational. That's because they're old. They can't get the parts because the elevators are too old to find the parts. They actually have to make the part because it's so old. And so we want to make sure that all our buildings are accessible for handicap, for special education students. And so that's why we're doing it. We're doing it to ensure that Dearborn Schools continues to be a vibrant school district, safe and secure. I know you have I'm doing kind of my own little script here, but
good,
safe and secure. And that's another huge thing, is to make sure that students are safe in the buildings. That has got to be the number one priority. This bond will bring that, and that's why we're doing it. And that's why I'm proud to say that I'm bringing this bond forward, because this is all about the students. This is all about the students, the school community, and the success of our great school district, Dearborn Public Schools. And I'm proud to say I started here as a teacher, as a substitute teacher, 24 years now, and I want to see this district, I want to see it continue to thrive for the benefit of our students. And that's why we brought it forward.
Couldn't say it better.
Nicely put.
That's
Absolutely.
nicely put.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is about the students. I mean, we're talking about infrastructure and that, but really it comes right back to the students. But we're about 5 minutes left. So hopefully, Glenn, you can stick around and help us answer some questions here. We did get some online questions. We have a question asking about how many buses are included in this proposal. And there are buses included, about $2 million allocated for buses. We run a fleet of about 90 buses. And if you think about it, if you replace 10 buses a year, it would take 9 years to replace the entire fleet. So that's an ongoing kind of thing that we have to do. And bond dollars, you are allowed to use them for technology. You are allowed to use them for buses. And so about $2 million will go toward buses as well. And we also had another question that came in asking, how does a bond work? I kind of a couple things there. I'm not sure if they're asking about bond dollars versus general fund dollars, which Mr. Wall kind of explained. They're two separate pots and can only be used for specific things. Also, bonds are, we actually go on the market and sell the bonds, and people buy the bonds, and that's where the money comes from. And then we repay them back with interest.
What would the capital, yes.
And I think I could say the Board of Education, myself, Mr. Wall, a few years back, you heard him say, we save the taxpayers' dollars by going back out and selling the bonds for a better interest rate. Right now, interest rates are at all-time low. This is the time to go out and do it. If any time, this is the time. It's a much better investment for taxpayers to do it right now, because you're going to get more for your dollar. And therefore, too, we're getting ahead of potential inflation in the construction market.
So we do have a few audience members here. I'm going to just kind of turn to them and ask if anybody here has any questions that we could answer for you. No? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you could. Yeah.
Good to meet you.
You guys are, addressing the immediate issues. Is there like a long haul outlook, like as you mentioned, 60 years seems to be the average. Is there a 60-year plan?
Well, because you have the last name, give me the privilege to answer. Good
So
to meet you, Captain.
just to restate the question and for
The
those
question
listening at
is,
home.
given the fact that the average age of our buildings is 60 years, do we have a 60-year plan to address the needs of the aging buildings? Excellent question, Kathy, and thank you for being here today. The Board of Education and the superintendent, these bonds, every bond we put out in front of our voters, and if it passes, it lasts about 20 years. So it's a 20-year cycle is the life of every bond. We can't pay it off unless the circumstance changes and we have the ability to pay it off, but usually it's a 20-year plan. If the state of Michigan increases the foundation money per student, let's say magical number, it doubles, so we will put more money into the infrastructure and we can infuse that money into the life of these buildings. But as of right now, I can't see us, but going back every 20 years or so to maintain these buildings. Now, full transparency here, some of our community members have been saying, why don't you tear down these buildings and build brand new buildings and get it over with? Well, the fact of the matter is, when we speak about being fiscally responsible, putting out a no mill tax increase, we are meeting some opposition. And this is a democracy. People, have the right to express their opinion, and we totally, from our stand, respect their opinion. And being fiscally responsible. So if we go, that project will cost over close to $1 billion. And this was done by experts. It's not by me, David, or our superintendent. This is consulting firms that their business is to deal with school finance and school bonds and so on and so forth. So it will cost 3 times the amount of mill rate that we have right now, a huge increase in mill rate. I want the best for my students. You want the best for your children, and that's a given. But we have to live within our means how we can, improve the structural conditions of our buildings. So, in summary, this is a phase-in project. We cannot fix everything for the next 100 years. It doesn't happen. Even the U.S. Capitol building, every 30 or 40 years, they have a major facelift so that it withstands the elements.
Can I add something to that
Sure,
too? Just
yeah.
a couple of points too. Appreciate it, the question as well. Part of it too goes back to last year's infrastructure committee, and you mentioned the zero mill rate. Everything in this bond is based on that committee. So we wanted to honor the recommendations of that committee. So the board accepted the recommendations and didn't go for the higher mill increase. As Mr. Jafer was saying, $1 billion is an estimate, and that doesn't even include possible land acquisition. If we were just to look at the 12 buildings, we're looking at just under 500 million. So the question becomes, with the 240 million, we're all about the entire district. You talked about the whole size of the district. So this is the best plan we came up with after multiple hours and time to address the entire district. Otherwise, you're picking and choosing. And so, could I address school A like Lori, but then what about the other 10 schools on the other side of the district? So that's why we had to kind of, within our means, within our budget, make decisions. And so you could have, obviously you could have went to higher, but at this time, we didn't feel it was in the best interest based on the committee recommendations. Secondly, you mentioned the state. I think that's very important. Right now, the state system is broken. That's why we don't have this extra funding. We don't even have a budget from the state. We're going on an estimate. I've been out there publicly. I was at the state superintendent conference advocating. I'm on the association for the superintendent board for the state of Michigan. We're trying to advocate for the formula goes back to 94. So until the state actually fixes the system, we have to go for these kind of bonds. Right now, Michigan, over a 15-year period, rates last of 50 states in education funding growth. We have not invested. And then when you look at, we just don't want to see the district deteriorate like the roads in Michigan have deteriorated. So we need to invest now and not kick the can down the road.
That's
So
the
that's why I
reality.
think we're doing,
This
so
is a proactive plan rather than a reactive
Yeah.
plan, and that's what it's
Appreciate
going to
the question
prevent
again.
us from
Yeah.
being reactive. We don't want to wait till it's January and it's -3 degrees and a boiler breaks and we have no heat in a school and it takes a week to replace and school's closed for a week. That happened in a neighboring district not too long ago. So we want to make sure that things like that don't happen, and this is a proactive plan. It is part of a bigger 10-year capital improvements plan that addresses needs throughout the district. And we know from our construction experts that we've been talking with that remodeling per square foot is a lot less than building new. Those costs, they're a lot less. And this remodeling and these kinds of upgrades that we're talking about doing to our buildings will extend their life from 20 to 30 years. So I think, putting all of these factors together really helps, kind of put this plan in perspective. And thank you. That was an
very good
excellent
question. It was
question.
an excellent.
Excellent
I mean,
question.
one other
So-
thing to add too, like just the tradition, a lot, I was at the 100-year anniversary of Salina, and you love the build, it's could we maintain that, or the Fortson?
Yeah.
We went through the media center and all the things with the Department of Treasury. So we also want to maintain some of that history and tradition, making sure though that we have good facilities for our students.
Right. And that's what we talked about earlier about kind of the history of the district. We have not only grandparents, but great grandparents who live in Dearborn and their children and their grandchildren and great grandchildren go to Dearborn schools. I think that's something to be proud of. We're coming up on our 45-minute mark. Time flies here when you're having fun. And we did go a little bit longer so that those who were on Facebook who joined us a little bit later. The good news is this. The entire meeting has been recorded, and we will now post this up on our district's YouTube channel, and people will be able to watch it as much as they like. I know myself, I'll probably go home and watch it at least another dozen times, just so I can listen to the golden tones of Mr. Hassan Jafer. So that'll be my reason for watching it.
That's a first for me.
Yeah. Glenn, thank you so much
Sure,
for
thank you.
joining us
Appreciate
here,
the time.
and
Thank you.
your passion for this it shows through, and your true commitment to the children of this district and the students show through as well.
I have a question.
Sure.
People are posting questions on Facebook Live. Would this be open for a while, or are we stopping the questions when the broadcast is done?
Yeah, we'll still collect those questions, and we have a BRICS Bond blog site, the website. It's been up there throughout the program, and we have a frequently asked questions section, and we'll add those questions to that section, answer them, and people can go there and find out that. I highly recommend if you're looking for that information to go to that blog site. It really is chock full of all kinds of great information, tax rates. It has a list of projects for every school. It breaks down the cost of those projects per school. So a lot of good information.
And also,
there.
it lists the dates of the visits at every building.
That's right.
We have been fortunate. We've been visiting schools, and we'll continue to visit all 34 schools, meeting with our parents and our staff, explaining to them what this BRICS Bond proposal entails.
That's right. So if you miss this podcast, if you miss watching it on YouTube, and you want to see Hassan and I live in person, sold out show.
Yeah,
We got to
my
get
sympathy
T-shirts.
then.
We got to get T-shirts made. You can come and see us, and that whole, like I said, that whole list of schools is up there as well on the BRICS Bond website. Hassan, thank you.
Can I just say too? I think
No.
the two of you gentlemen. Oh yeah. Well, he said no, but I'm still going to
Go
do
ahead.
it. But remember,
Well, you're
remember
my
who does
boss.
your,
You're my
yeah.
boss, so go
Anyway, I was going to compliment you guys, but now maybe no, I'm kidding. You've done a great job, and I just want to say too, we're all about transparency. So just as we tell the students, be careful of where you get your sources of information from. You got to make sure that you got to research properly and make sure to make an informed decision on this vote. So make sure that we're not just someone throws something out on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be. And, you got to be careful. Vet your sources. So what I'm going to welcome anyone is that you're available. We have the
Absolutely.
data. It's transparent. If you have a question, we're all very transparent. We have the board meetings open, public. Your email is accessible. Call us at the communications office. We're very happy to provide that information. So I just last thing, both for students and just the general community, this today's day and age of social media and things out there and all different sources,
Right.
is you got to be careful with, what is accurate facts. And so we're willing to provide that data, and we're going to be very transparent. And I think the blog you've put together does that as well. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Well.
All right. I think that does it. Hassan?
Thank you for inviting us to your cell phones or computers, whatever you're watching us, and thank you for the live audience that took the time to be with us. This is all about kids, and I know some members of the community are very passionate about presenting different plans, but the reality is we have what we have right now. It's as far as I'm concerned, it's a solid plan that addresses the next 20 or 30 years of our needs in the district with 0 mill increase. I don't think you can get better than that.
There it is. He said it all right there. Wraps it up really nice. The only thing I have left to say is don't forget to vote on November 5th. It is one of the greatest privileges and rights that we have here in this country. So make sure that you are at the polls on November 5th. Thanks, and we'll see you around the district.